They say your home is your peace, but what if someone tried to take it from you? Meet Marcus, a black man who finally bought his dream house. Everything was perfect until Karen showed up clipboard in hand, demanding he pay rent for his own house. "You own this house. That's cute," she laughed. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't argue. He stayed calm, and the next day when Karen returned, she was greeted by the police, the real HOA president, and a news crew. Marcus held up the deed and said, "Since you're so eager to collect rent, why don't you tell everyone who actually lives here?" Her face turned pale. The HOA fined her for harassment. Marcus didn't just defend his home, he turned it into a movement helping other families own their dream homes. Sometimes the best revenge is owning the house they said you couldn't. Houses Fire Marcus Carter had always believed in one simple truth: hard work pays off. For 15 years, he'd worked double shifts at an auto plant in Atlanta, saving every dollar he could. He grew up in a small apartment with peeling walls, the kind of place where you could hear your neighbors argue through the vents. His mom used to tell him, "One day, you'll have a house where no one can tell you you don't belong." That sentence stuck with him his whole life. So when Marcus finally held the keys to his new home, a beautiful two-story house with a porch swing and a blooming magnolia tree, he didn't just see walls and bricks. He saw freedom. It was his mother's dream, now alive in front of him. The first week in the neighborhood was peaceful. Kids rode bikes past his driveway, dogs barked at sunset, and the mailman even congratulated him on being the new homeowner. But there was one neighbor who didn't smile, a woman named Karen Mitchell, who lived across the street. Karen had lived there for over a decade and had an opinion about everything: who cut their grass too short, who parked slightly crooked, who didn't fit in. The neighborhood was her kingdom, and she loved to remind everyone that she was on the HOA board, even though the actual president had quietly retired years ago. It started small. One morning, Marcus came outside to find a note taped to his mailbox. Reminder: tenants must keep their lawn below 3 inches per HOA standards. He chuckled, brushed it off, and mowed the next day just to be polite. But then came another note. And another. "Please remove your truck from the driveway overnight. Noise complaint, music too loud at 8:30 p.m. Neighborhood fees due. Contact me for payment." That last one made Marcus stop in his tracks. Neighborhood fees. He had read every document when he closed the house. There was no HOA, no association, no fees. So the next morning, he decided to ask. Karen was outside watering her plants, her eyes flicking toward him the second he stepped onto his lawn. He smiled. "Morning, ma'am. I got a note from you about fees." Karen looked him up and down, the way people do when they've already made up their mind. "Oh, right," she said, her tone sharp. "Tenants have to pay HOA dues at the start of every month. You can give the check to me directly." Marcus frowned slightly. "Tenants? I think you're mistaken. I'm not renting, I own this property." Karen's fake smile barely wavered. "Oh, you own this house," she said, emphasizing the word like it was something foreign. "That's interesting. We've never had anyone like you own property here." There it was, the pause, the tone, the look. Marcus had seen that look his whole life, the look that said, "You don't belong here." He took a deep breath, smiled politely, and said, "Have a good day, ma'am." Then he walked back inside. But inside, his heart was racing. Anger burned beneath the surface. He thought of his mother again, how proud she'd been when he showed her the house on FaceTime. "Don't let nobody take that joy from you, baby," she'd said. That night Marcus sat on his couch thinking. He could ignore Karen and hope she'd get bored. Or he could make sure she never tried this with anyone else again. The next day he made a few calls. One to the real HOA president, a kind older gentleman named Mr. Daniels, who confirmed that Karen hadn't been on the board in years. One to a local community officer who dealt with Karen's complaints before, and one to his friend Malik, who worked at a local news station, always looking for stories about discrimination and neighborhood injustice. The plan was simple: let Karen walk herself right into her own embarrassment. 2 mornings later, Karen showed up again, clipboard in hand. "Sir," she began, "I've given you plenty of time to make your payment. If you don't hand over your rent check today, I'll have to report you." Marcus kept his cool. "All right then, ma'am. Why don't you come by tomorrow morning? We can sort everything out properly." Her face lit up. She thought she'd won. "Oh, wonderful," she said. "Finally someone who understands the rules." The next morning, Karen strutted across the street like she owned it. But this time, waiting in Marcus's driveway, were the local police chief, Mr. Daniels, and a camera crew. Marcus smiled. "Morning, ma'am. You said you wanted to discuss payment." Karen froze, instantly realizing something was off. He held up a folder and opened it, revealing the deed to his home. His name, signed and stamped. "Here's proof of ownership. And these gentlemen here," he said, gesturing to the chief and Mr. Daniels, "can confirm you're not part of any HOA. In fact, they've been getting complaints about you harassing new homeowners." The camera caught every moment, her expression turning from confident to speechless. The police chief spoke next. "Ma'am, you have no authority to collect fees or contact residents this way. This behavior could be considered harassment." Karen stammered. I was just trying to enforce the rules." Mr. Daniels cut her off. "The rules don't include racism, Ms. Mitchell." She turned red, muttered something under her breath, and hurried back across the street while the cameras rolled. That night, the local news ran the clip under the headline, "Black homeowner confronts fake HOA harassment in suburban Atlanta." The video went viral in hours. Thousands of people praised Marcus for handling the situation with grace instead of anger. And Marcus, he decided to turn it into something bigger. He started a small online group called Home Means Home, connecting Black families with real estate mentors and lawyers to help them buy homes safely and confidently. Because for Marcus, the story wasn't just about standing up to a racist neighbor. It was about something deeper, proving that no one has the right to decide who belongs where. The morning after the viral news story, the neighborhood was buzzing. Some people avoided eye contact when Marcus walked outside. Others nodded respectfully, even waved. For the first time since moving in, he felt something new: respect. But Karen, she wasn't done. 2 days later, Marcus noticed a car parked across the street, tinted windows, engine running. When he stepped outside, the car sped off. That evening, someone left a note on his front door that said, "Maybe you should move back where you belong." Marcus stood there staring at the paper. The anger in his chest boiled, but he refused to let it show. He crumpled the note, tossed it in the trash, and whispered, "You're not winning this." He called his friend Malik from the news station. "Hey man, looks like Karen's still playing games." Malik replied, "You want me to run a follow-up piece? This could expose her even more." Marcus thought for a moment. "Not yet, I want her to expose herself." He decided to install security cameras, not just for safety, but for truth. Days passed. Marcus went back to work, planted flowers in his front yard, waved at kids on bikes. Life started to feel normal again, but deep down he knew Karen wasn't the type to let things go quietly. And he was right. One Saturday morning, as Marcus was washing his car, Karen came storming out of her house, furious, red-faced, shaking a folder. "You think you can embarrass me on TV?" she shouted across the street. Marcus calmly turned off the hose. "Good morning to you too, Ms. Mitchell." She marched up to his driveway. "I've spoken to my attorney. What you did was defamation. You had no right to record me." Marcus folded his arms. "Ma'am, the news station filmed in public, and everything you said was your choice." Her voice rose louder. "You people always play the victim. This used to be a nice neighborhood before." Marcus interrupted softly but firmly. "Before what, ma'am? Before I bought a house, before I paid my bills, before I earned what I worked for." Karen froze mid-sentence, realizing the neighbors were watching. Curtains moved. Phones came out. Marcus took one step closer, lowering his voice. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about your hate, and hate doesn't live here." He turned around and walked back to his car, leaving her standing there, trembling with rage. The video, of course, spread again. Within hours, it hit social media. Karen explodes on homeowner again. Comments flooded in. "He handled that like a king. The patience this man has is unreal. This is what grace under fire looks like." By the next morning, Karen's employer had seen the footage. She worked at a nearby real estate agency, ironic, considering she spent her time harassing a homeowner. By Monday, she was suspended pending investigation. Marcus didn't celebrate, he didn't smile. He just sat on his porch that evening, staring at the sunset, feeling tired. His phone buzzed. It was Malik again. "Man, the city council's reaching out. They want to feature you at a community event, talk about housing equality." Marcus chuckled softly. All this from one woman trying to collect fake rent. But beneath the humor, there was something heavier, a realization that this wasn't just his story. It was the story of so many who'd been told they didn't belong in certain places, jobs, or lives. The next week, Marcus stood on a small stage at a local park. The event was packed, families, activists, even city leaders. When it was his turn to speak, he took a deep breath and said, "I didn't buy a house to prove anything. I bought it because it was my dream, my mother's dream. But when someone tried to tell me I didn't belong here, I realized something. We don't just fight for space, we fight for peace. And peace only grows when we stand our ground with dignity." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. But Marcus's eyes drifted toward the back of the park, where he saw Karen, standing quietly, half hidden by a tree. Their eyes met for just a second. She looked smaller somehow, not angry, not loud, just defeated. She turned and walked away. After the event, Marcus sat alone in his car, thinking. Revenge hadn't been his goal, but justice had come naturally. And it wasn't the kind that humiliates, it was the kind that teaches. Weeks later, a letter arrived in his mailbox. It was from Karen. He hesitated before opening it. Inside was a short handwritten note. "I lost my job, I'm in counseling now. You didn't deserve what I said, I'm sorry." Marcus sat quietly for a long moment, reading it over and over. Then he grabbed a pen and wrote back. "Apology accepted. I hope you find peace too." He didn't mail it right away. He just placed it on his table, a reminder that sometimes closure isn't about winning. It's about healing. As weeks turned into months, Home Means Home grew online. Dozens of Black families joined, sharing stories, helping each other navigate real estate, loans, and discrimination. What began as a local Facebook group turned into a nonprofit organization. Local news stations covered it again, not for the drama, but for the hope it brought. Marcus's home became more than a house. It became a symbol. A place where a man once told he didn't belong now welcomed others to claim their place in the world. And every time he sat on that porch swing, hearing kids laugh down the street, he thought of his mom's voice again. "One day, you'll have a house where no one can tell you you don't belong." Now that day had come. And this time, he wasn't just living in that dream. He was protecting it for everyone else. Months passed. The leaves began to turn gold and the air grew crisp with the first touch of autumn. Marcus's house, once just a personal milestone, had now become a hub of community activity. Every Saturday, volunteers came over. Some brought food, Others brought folders and laptops to help new families fill out housing forms. The front porch that Karen once glared at from across the street now echoed with laughter, kids' footsteps, and the sound of people planning new beginnings. He had named his program Home Means Home, and what started as a neighborhood effort had spread to nearby towns. Churches, banks, and local leaders joined in. They helped first-time buyers learn about credit, inspections, and ownership rights, everything Marcus had once had to learn the hard way. Reporters came by sometimes to interview him. How did this all begin? They asked. And Marcus would always say the same thing. It started with one person trying to take my peace, but instead of fighting her with anger, I chose to fight her with purpose. He smiled every time he said it, not because he'd won, but because he'd grown. Across the street, Karen's house sat mostly quiet. The blinds stayed closed. The "for sale" sign she once threatened him with had long been taken down. Every so often, he'd see her watering the flowers in her front yard, a small, quiet act of normalcy. One morning, just as Marcus was loading boxes into his car for another housing seminar, he heard a voice behind him. "Marcus." He turned around. It was Karen. She looked different, softer, maybe older, her voice gentler than he remembered. She walked slowly toward him, holding a small plant in a pot. "I wanted to give you this," she said. "It's a magnolia. They say it means dignity and perseverance." Marcus looked at the plant for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Thank you, Ms. Mitchell." She nodded quietly. "I've been thinking a lot lately, about what I said, about who I was. You didn't deserve that." He nodded back. "I appreciate that." There was silence, not awkward, just human. Two people, once on opposite sides of hate, standing on the same patch of ground. Karen looked around at the volunteers setting up tables on his lawn. "You've done something really good here," she said. "You turned all of this into something beautiful." Marcus chuckled softly. "Guess I just took your rent collection idea and made it productive." For the first time, Karen laughed genuinely. Then she turned to leave, pausing halfway down the driveway. "Marcus." "Yeah. Thanks for not having me back." That sentence hit him harder than he expected. He watched her walk away, the magnolia pot heavy in his hands. That evening, he planted it right under the magnolia tree that had stood in his yard since the day he moved in. Side by side, old and new, roots and renewal. Weeks later, the Home Means Home program got a major donation, enough to expand statewide. Marcus was invited to speak at a housing conference in Washington, D.C. As he stood before hundreds of people, lights shining bright, he thought about where it all started: one house, one neighbor, one act of defiance wrapped in calm. He began his speech simply. "When someone tries to take away your dignity, remember, they can only take it if you hand it to them. When I was told I didn't belong, I learned something powerful. Home isn't a place, it's peace. And when you protect your peace, you protect generations to come." The room fell silent. Then came a standing ovation. After the conference, a young couple approached him, a black woman and a Latino man holding hands. "Mr. Carter," the woman said, "we watched your story online. Because of you, we just bought our first house." Marcus smiled, shaking their hands. "Welcome home," he said softly. Later that night, back in Atlanta, Marcus sat on his porch swing, the air warm and quiet. The streetlights glowed softly, and across the road, Karen's porch light flicked on. She waved once, a small, silent acknowledgement, and he waved back. He looked at the magnolia tree beside him, its new leaves shimmering under the light. He thought of his mom's words again. "One day, you'll have a house where no one can tell you you don't belong." And now, he finally whispered back to her memory, "Ma, I'm home." A gentle wind passed through the magnolia leaves, rustling like applause. The camera would fade out there, Marcus sitting in peace, the soft glow of the house behind him, the magnolia swaying in the breeze. A final quote appears on screen. Home is not where you live. Home is where you are finally free.